Over the last few weeks, we've been learning a lot about social networks, social media, the Metcalfe's Law, and basically information systems and the power of computing today. And this week, we've actually looked at data, open source systems, and the cloud. Well, that's not where we all began. Way back when, and my kids will tell you back before rocks turned into dirt, and related to the question I asked earlier this week for you to contemplate, there was an organization that was called the National Photographic and Interpretation Center, or Npic, as I knew it. Npic was actually created by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1961. And the technology that was available back then and what we can do today is truly amazing. But if you think of the time back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and what was accomplished, I think you would be amazed. And it kind of starts to fill in why Unix and Linux was important to us. The photo that you see here is actually an aerial photo of Southeast DC back when Npic was first built. So in the beginning, there was the U-2, that's a plane, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And with how the complexity of what we needed to see and the division of how the government worked then, Dwight Eisenhower saw a need to start to merge some of the capabilities. So Npic was combined with what was then the Central Intelligence Agency's photographic interpretation area and DoD assets. So the U-2 was flown by the Air Force, but it was up to the CIA's imagery analyst to take that film and look at it and try to decide what was in those photographs. And what you see in this photograph is the actual photographs that were taken during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So here we see the U-2, and the image here was also taken by U-2, and if you look really close, you can see the little airplanes down there on the runway, and that's of a Soviet area. But at this same time, we needed to be able to process quicker. Remember, the film came back, it was downloaded, it had to be processed, and then analysts had to look at these images to try to figure out what was there and get them to the people, such as the president and his national command authorities, so that decisions could be made every day. What we had on the computer side was Unix starting to get a role. Again, back in the 60s. Dennis Ritchie was one of the inventors of Unix, of the operating system and of the hardware. Unix rolled right along, and then in the 1980s, kind of a war started out. AT&T and the Sun System, Sun Microsystems actually, joined together and built a business in the government, while others in this Linux Unix game turned more to open source, and there became the division of expertise. But then as the evolution of imagery grew and our capabilities, we moved off of the airplanes and into space. And now this image is, again, of a Soviet airfield taken from space, and the data translated down to the Earth, and again, has to be processed, has to quickly get together. And this was long before Fios or Comcast or whoever your cable company is, long before the cloud and long before the internet as we know it today. So the requirement to rapidly process data from a satellite, the process to quickly meet the needs of the intelligence community and the national command authorities, Unix and Linux was our answer. This operating system and bringing fiber directly to the desktop gave us the capability to process all of the data that was coming down from the satellite. And remember, it's more than a picture, because you have to also know where the satellite was in any given time in space and what part of the Earth it was looking at any given time. And remember, we're looking at the late 80s and the early 90s when I worked at Npic. So there you go. That's the reason Linux and Unix was such a power horse back in the day for my work back at Npic. And as in all good researchers and presenters, we present our references. Thanks for this week. Looking forward to next week.